Hello and welcome everyone to English Digest. I'm Adam.
And I'm Elsie. Adam, I have a question for you.
Okay, is it a private question or is it what kind of question are we talking about?
It's not a private question.
Okay.
What were some of the biggest differences you noticed between your culture and Taiwanese culture?
Oh, okay.
So your culture, I mean American culture.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest. So I'm from country, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest difference? Well, I mean, I had a little bit of culture shock moving here because it was Taipei, such a big city. And I think one of the things would be that I noticed completely different would be just how overly friendly and helpful that Taiwanese people are when you get lost. They'll go out of their way to help you.
We do that.
Another big difference would be, that's a good question. As we're talking about this, what would be another thing that I've noticed? I've lived here now. That's the hard thing. Once you live in a place for quite some time, that kind of cultural differences kind of go away.
Oh, really? So when you arrived in Taiwan more than 10 years ago, how did you feel during your first encounter with our culture? I think just like what you said, right? You thought people were super, super friendly?
Super friendly. I thought, obviously, when you're speaking a different language, and even though throughout the years my Chinese has kind of stayed at a first or second grade level, hasn't really improved that much, so it is a little bit harder. But I mean, just it's noisier. I say there's some things that are different, like where I'm from, we hold the door open for people and make sure to, have the door open if you're walking behind someone. Here, that cultural difference is, you don't hold the door open for someone.
Some people still do that, but I know what you mean.
But there's more people here, right? So if you hold the door open for one person, you're here, you kind of have to hold it for all of them. So
okay,
that was a different thing.
In this unit, we're going to write an essay about culture shock.
Right. And yeah, the title of this article is called My Experience of Culture Shock.
我的文化冲击经验. And here's the prompt.
Due to the impact of globalization, everyone may encounter different cultures in their lives. Please describe an experience of facing culture shock. Explain the difficulties you encountered and how you dealt with them. The essay should be at least 120 words and can be divided into paragraphs.
提示是由于全球化的影响，每个人在生活当中都有可能接触到不同的 cultures 不同的文化，请你描述一次承受文化冲击的经验，并在文中说明所遭遇的困境以及如何应对处理。那文长呢，至少是120个单词，文章可以分段。那接下来到了 develop and approach 的部分，第一个，何谓叙述文？叙述文是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常常出现在大考的作文题目当中。常见的类型有：第一个，描述经验或事件；第二个，描述物品；第三个，描述人物。举凡日常生活当中的人事物都可以是叙述文的题材。这个呢，单元当中着重的是描述经验或是事件的叙述文。第二个，写什么，怎么写。英文作文的架构呢，基本上是分为引言 introduction、文章主体 body， 还有结论 conclusion。那本篇描述经验的叙述文也是要用这样的架构做发展的。首先来到 introduction 引言的部分，说明呢书写此篇文章的动机。全文的主旨句 thesis statement 常在第一段点出来。在描述经验的文章当中， introduction 可以有以下几种方法来开头。第一个，在此经验发生前，你对此经验抱持什么样的看法？第二个，一般人对此经验的看法。第三个，这个经验对你个人的意义是什么？然后呢，就可以到 body 文章的主体，通常是过程的叙述，许多相关的细节，也就是 supporting details， 也多在这边加以描述。那在叙述的整个经验过程当中，可以依事件发生的时间顺序来描述，也可以用倒叙法。那要特别注意是时态的一致性哦。细节的部分呢，要挑可以衬托主旨的内容来讲，不要拉拉杂杂的写一堆不相关的细节，模糊了焦点哈。所以呢，你可以这么看，把这个 introduction 这个文章的引言当成中心，然后呢，你去做更多细节的描述。那接下来呢，有常见的叙述文架构 A. 何时发生 When 何地发生 Where 参与者是何人 Who B. 为什么会发生 Why 还有如何发生 How C. 事件如何收场结果是什么也就是带出 the result 或是 the consequence D. 事情发生中或发生后感受如何 How you feel 所以你会发现其实环绕在5个 WH 还有一个 How 的疑问词当中的。那最后呢就会来到 conclusion 文章的结论，说明意义还有体会。那在描述经验的文章当中呢，可以说明这个事件给了自己什么样的启示，给了自己什么样的体会，对自己有什么样的改变或是影响。那第三个我们要多练习才会熟能生巧。以下有几个建议的题目，你可以在听完今天的 Topic-Based Writing Unit 之后呢，自己再多加练习。比如说第一个 An experience of helping a stranger 好，帮助陌生人的经验也可以是这样子的主题。B. An experience of doing volunteer work 做志工的经验。Okay, so before we write an essay, we can try to brainstorm, right?
Right, exactly. So we need to think about a time when you felt confused or surprised by a new culture you need to write about.Okay,
所以我们可以 focus 聚焦在第一个 what happened.
Right, we can ask ourselves what happened.
发生了什么事情当时
Then we could ask ourselves what was hard for you.
对，发生的事情当中哪个部分对你来说是很困难的 and how you solved the problems. 你是怎么样解决这些问题的
Exactly. And then let's look at number 2. Think of an experience. So you need to ask yourself,Did I travel to another country?
我有到别的国家去旅游吗？好，你问这些问题，自己就可以在脑中去想到一些过去的经验，有助于你等一下的写作。
Did I meet someone from a different culture?
我有没有遇过来自不同文化的人呢？
Was there a time I didn't understand another culture?
有没有什么时间点是我不了解当地的文化？And number 3, write down ideas. 也就是 where and when it happened. For example, when I went to Japan for the first time. 也就是我第一次到日本的时候，可能看到了什么状况，自己不会什么，把它写出来。And what was hard? It could be food, language, or customs. For example, like when you came here,Was it hard for you to always remember to take off your shoes before you go into different houses?
Not really, because my mom also made us take off shoes in our household, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I know most Americans, I think, don't take off their shoes in some places. I think it's more common now, but that wasn't really a big culture shock. I would say some of the food would be, or going to the night markets would be more of a culture shock.
Yeah, and the language.
And obviously the language is a huge culture shock.
OK, 那接下来呢，你就要问自己咯，那我当时是做了什么来解决这个问题的 What I did. Did you ask questions? Did you watch others? Or try new things?
Right. Now we need to make an outline with our ideas. So,Make an outline. Topic sentence 1. I had my first experience of culture shock last summer. Here are the supporting details. A. I felt stressed out about having to use English all the time. B. It was hard to understand what my host family was saying. C. I felt self-conscious about speaking English.
好，所以第一段当中主题句第一句在说的是我在去年夏天第一次经历了 culture shock， 第一次经历了文化冲击。那知识的细节 A 说的是我对必须要一直使用英语感到很有压力。 I think a lot of people do feel stressed out about speaking English, especially all the time.
Yes, that does put a lot of pressure on you or on someone who is not a native English speaker.OK，
然后刚刚的 B 是我很难理解寄宿家庭说的话，这就是作者在当时遇到的 problem， 遇到的问题。然后还有 C， 我对讲英语感到有些自卑。然后呢，就要到了主题句第二句 topic sentence 2。这一句话呢，作者写的是 I dealt with this problem by trying not to put too much pressure on myself。我透过尽量不要给自己太大的压力来处理这个问题。But how to achieve that? A. I told myself to be patient and that I would improve. 我告诉自己要有耐心，然后呢，相信自己是会进步的。
All right. B. My host helped me a lot by speaking more slowly.
我的寄宿家庭帮助了我很多，他们说话会放慢速度。
C. I realized no one cared too much when I made mistakes.
我意识到当我犯错的时候，其实没有什么人会太在意。So Adam, do you feel stressed out when speaking Chinese? Mandarin Chinese?
Yes, I feel stressed out.
Still now?
Yeah, with your mom, I guess a little bit stressed out because I don't sometimes know all the words I need to say or want to say when I'm trying to express myself, maybe more smoothly.
What about when you speak to clerks or, people on the street?
Well, like when I'm speaking to clerks or like the breakfast woman.
Yeah.Then
no, because I kind of have memorized everything that I would need to say. It's kind of, I would say, in a memory bank where it's, what you eat for breakfast is the same thing. What I get at 7-Eleven is the same thing. I kind of know what's going to be said.
Okay, but what if the breakfast lady wants to chat with you? Like ask you some other questions.
Oh, more like personal questions?
Yeah.
Then after a couple maybe questions...then I will start to be a little bit more nervous and think, oh, did I understand what she said correctly? And then my response is responding to that response correctly? Or am I giving her maybe other information that she didn't even ask for because I misunderstood what she said?
Do you think people slow down when they speak Chinese to you? Not really, right?
Not really. No, not really.
They just assume you are very good at speaking Mandarin.
Because I can say the first couple things or the first couple sentences
that already impressed them.
Quickly. And then they go too deep and I'm like, oh, okay, my vocabulary is gone.
They started rapping. 好，那最后到了这个结论的部分 concluding sentence 这边写的是 While I had some difficult moments, I value the learning experience. 虽然我经历了一些艰难的时刻，但是我珍惜这次学习的经历。
Okay, now everyone, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Writing Sample 1. I had my first experience of culture shock last summer. I was in the UK as part of a 2-month camp for students who wanted to major in English in college. However, after the first few days, I began to feel stressed out about having to use English all the time. For one thing, it was hard to understand everything my host family was saying. For another, I began to feel very self-conscious about speaking English. This stopped me from making new friends. I dealt with this problem by trying not to put too much pressure on myself. I just told myself to be patient and that I would slowly improve as long as I didn't give up. My hosts were very kind to me and helped me a lot by speaking more slowly. Moreover, I realized that no one I met cared too much when I made mistakes. This helped me relax and my English improved as a result. While I had some difficult moments in the UK, I've come to really value the learning experience. After looking over writing sample 1, the writing style of this essay is simple yet clear, making it easy to follow the writer's thought process. The writer describes the challenge of using English all the time and the language barrier with the host family, which fits the description of culture shock, right?
是的，那作者呢也提到自己感到有压力啦、自卑以及难以理解寄宿家庭的语言，好把问题呈现了出来。那这些都表达得相当清楚，而且也做了很充分的说明。然后最后呢，他就说 While I had some difficult moments in the UK, I've come to really value the learning experience. 虽然呢我在英国有一些很困难的时刻，但是最后我是相当重视珍视这一项学习的经验，那就做了很完整的一个结论。
And that's interesting because a lot of times you could take culture shock as a negative thing and tell people a negative thing about it and then not grow from it. With this article, the writer talks about being patient with themselves, getting help from the host, and realizing that mistakes don't matter. These are all practical and helpful ways to deal with culture shock.
是的，刚刚 Adam 提到一个很重要的重点，就是 culture shock 文化冲击不一定要导致负面的结果，正面的像是这一篇范文里面的正面结果也是可以的，也是相当重要的。那接下来我们看到 grammar tips 的地方，第一个 For one thing, it was hard to understand. For another, I began to... 这边要让同学们注意到的是 for one thing 跟 for another 的使用。片语 for one thing, for another 表示的是一方面，首先如何，另一方面，其次又是如何。通常用于说明一致的两个方面。如果要表示相互矛盾的两个方面的话，我们会用 on one hand 跟 on the other hand， 好，或者是你说 on the one hand 跟 on the other hand 也是可以的。这就可以表示一方面如何，而另外一方面相反面又是如何。So for example,
yeah, an example we could say would be, I don't like it here. For one thing, the weather is too humid. For another, it's too remote.
我不喜欢这里，首先天气太潮湿了，其次这里太偏僻了。所以你会发现For one thing 跟 for another 他们带出的都是负面的事情，好，是一致的。然后你先说了第一点，再用 for another 带出第二点是什么。那第二句话我们要聚焦在 I just told myself to be patient and that I would slowly improve as long as I didn't give up. As long as 它是一个连接词片语，表示只要点就点。你也可以用 so long as。当 as long as 放在句首的时候，副词子句和主要子句中间是必须要有逗点区隔的。
An example we could say would be, Sam's parents will forgive him as long as he admits his mistakes and apologizes sincerely.
只要 Sam 承认他的错误并真诚的道歉，他的父母就会原谅他。那你当然也可以把 as long as跟他所带出来的子句放到句首去，那句子就会是 As long as Sam admits his mistake and apologizes sincerely, 逗号接上，然后接出 his parents will forgive him。第三个我们要注意到的句子是 While I had some difficult moments in the UK, I've come to really value the learning experience。这里的 while 至于句首相当于 although 或是 though， 也就是表示尽管虽然的意思。那连接词呢 while 的其他常见用法还有很多，比如说第一个表示在点期间，可以置于句首或是句中。还有就是第二个表示然而或是但是，那这个用法呢表示前后的对照要置于句中， 前面必须要有逗点，也相当于 whereas 或是 but.
Now, use an example sentence with this, we could do something like, while Joseph's parents didn't approve of his career choice, he stuck to his dream and made it happen.
这边的 while 就是带出尽管虽然的意思哦。尽管虽然呢 Joseph 的父母不赞成他的职业选择，他还是坚持理想并实现它。So we also can use although or though here to replace while, right?
That's correct.
So we can say, although or though Joseph's parents didn't approve of his career choice, comma, 逗号, he stuck to his dream and made it happen.
Exactly. He didn't give up.
那接下来呢，我们就要到另一 sample 的部分。
Writing Sample 2. Before studying abroad in the UK last year, I'd never considered how much culture shock would affect me. However, looking back on my time there now, I wish I'd spent more time preparing emotionally. Everything was new and exciting at first, but as time passed, I started feeling lonely. I hadn't made any friends to share my experiences with because I struggle with the language barrier. Discussing my feelings was difficult, and there were few people around who really understood. Unfortunately, my problems didn't improve right away. To avoid confusing and frustrating situations, I stopped going out. It was only when a classmate invited me to a movie that I really made a friend. We started hanging out, and soon I had someone to confide in. She helped me meet more people and even find a language exchange partner. I started enjoying my interactions with people more once I became more confident. That's why, this year, I'm helping future exchange students get ready for their journeys abroad. Now, after looking after writing sample 2, it sounds like the writer talks about feeling culture shock while studying in the UK. And how did they feel? Well, they felt lonely and had trouble with the language, which are common parts of culture shock. Don't you think so?
Right, 这边呢有提到除了语言啦，还有这个很寂寞的感觉 Feeling lonely is a big problem too. 那作者呢还解释了自己因为语言障碍感到孤独，而且很难交朋友，这是许多人都能够理解的情况。So the writer also mentioned about making new friends. How do you think about that?
Well, I think it's always good when you move to a different culture to make new friends, even if it's a hard time initially trying to find people that you have something in common with. But I'm sure in the UK, people are open and friendly to a lot of different cultures. I mean, if you're in the UK, it's a very, diverse country. So there's a lot of different cultures kind of mixing all together. But as our writer tells us, it says the writer shares how they solved the problem by, like you said, going to a movie with a classmate, making a friend, and becoming more confident. They also mention helping future students prepare, showing how they've grown. And that's really responsible, taking future efforts to make sure that they really try to fit in and make the best of their situation. So overall, with this essay, I think the essay is very well organized. The content is personal and relevant. The writer's choice to help others based on their own experience makes the essay even more meaningful.
Yes, and the author also mentioned he stopped going out to avoid confusing and frustrating situations. Did you ever have that kind of experience?
Where I stopped going out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Like when you first came to Taiwan?
Yeah, sometimes I would there'd be weeks where I would kind of be overstimulated with my head, walking out. When I first moved here, I lived not far from a night market. So I was...
通化街.
Yeah. in 通化
So you were
yeah.
close to everything.
Even morning market. So it would be very noisy in the morning, waking up and then going down, and there'd be people, massive amounts of people to my understanding.
Did you get scared?
Not so much scared, but just overwhelmed. So sometimes we like our own bubble. A lot of maybe foreigners have their own personal space bubble, we call it, where they don't like being touched and they don't like being so close or surrounded by that many people. And that to this day is still a culture shock that I deal with every day. But yes, like our character, like the writer in this, you kind of sometimes put yourself aside and maybe spend more time alone. And then that kind of maybe helps you get a introspective view on different cultures while you're there.
And you can get over the fear and the frustration.
Right. And so, like I said, this content is very personal and relevant. It really does help other people understand what it's like to go through culture shock in a different country.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for today.
My name is Adam.
And I'm Elsie.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.